on. And being in the kind of work that I have for some little time, I'm in the habit of giving titles to the things that I say in public. And this is no exception. So these remarks about our friend, husband, father, brother, grandchildren, are simply and appropriately called Ronnie. I chose that title and that name because that's how I knew him best, and that's how I knew him the longest. And I think with the exception of his uncle Bill and his brother George, I knew Ron longer than any other person on earth, about 65 years worth. So if it's fitting that I'm standing here at a sheer seniority, since I knew him from the time when he was a cherub-faced little boy, on up until the end of his time with all of us, it's all the more so because you, his family and friends of such long standing, are here to share in this time of memory and celebration. That's the way he wanted it. He wanted a few words, a few hymns, a few prayers, and a great party. So for the moment, I thought you might like to hear something about those times of what Ronnie and I did together that made us happy and sometimes sad, what got us into trouble and out of trouble, and a lot of other things that I can't disclose because I can't remember them. All of which had a lot to do with the man we all came to know until the end of his days and still love through the end of ours. Ron and I first met on a very gray and chilly October day, way back somewhere in the 50s, not the 1850s, but the 1950s. I was playing football with another boy named Ronnie, a member of my Cub Scout troop, and somehow Ron got into the mix, which is a character trait that he carried all of his life, that most of you know about and some of you have experienced yourself, such as Jay was just saying. So the next day after school, I went back to where we met, and I stood outside in the front of his apartment building, wondering where he was and how I could find him. And as he told me in later years, his mother saw me standing there. And she said to him, "Ronnie, that little boy you met yesterday is outside. Go out and play with him." And he did. And in one form or another, we played on until a year ago today. And with a few other choice moments in my life, it was the best time I ever had. And I know that many of you will resonate with that. Now, along the way, these things happened to make it that way. We soon discovered that we both went to the same school, Towson Elementary, except he was in the 4th or 5th grade and I was a year behind. That changed, however, as time passed, with his repeating grade 7, along with grade 11. Because he chose the, quote, road not taken philosophy of education, and honked off all of his teachers. But we still hung out, as it is said today. We meet up after school during the week, and on Saturdays we go to the YMCA in the morning, where Ron learned to box and I learned to play ping pong. Then we would go, it wasn't that bad. Then we would go down to Michael's Deli down the street, and each of us get a giant submarine sandwich with lots of what was known as hots for 50 cents. And then we go up to the Towson Theater to watch the latest Westerns for a quarter. Now, there were two other things we did back then, one of which could have led to untold riches for both of us, and the other which did lead, in later life, to great sadness and loss. As for the latter, it was around the time when we were about 12 that we would sneak out the back door of the YMCA on Saturday mornings, and we'd go down into the woods, where we would sit near the bottom of a trestle of the Ma and Pa Railroad, and we smoked our first cigarettes. Kent was the brand, as I recall. We started doing that on a regular basis. And as the years passed and we moved on to Towson High School, the principal, whose name was Mr. Wheeler, a rather progressive guy in some ways, established a smoking area where we could all go out and puff a few before going to class. And that became a habit for both of us, which continued far too long for Ron, until it was too late to turn back. And I'll leave that at that. The other thing we got into as kids was collecting Topps baseball cards. We would go out and buy a pack of 5 cards for a nickel, which came with a large stick of bubble gum, and hope that our favorite team players would show up, which in those pre-Oriole days was the New York Yankees. When they didn't, we'd buy more cards, and we'd have more gum. And this process would go on for most of the baseball season until one year, probably on the way home from the dentist's office, we decided to combine our collections into one huge mass, which we kept in an empty blue record box at Ronnie's house. We had somewhere between 100 and 100,000 cards. One of those cards was a 1952 Mickey Mantle, who was the star center fielder of the New York Yankees. We kept it in mint condition because we thought he was the coolest player around. Some years later, after we grew out of our baseball collecting stage into our girl scouting stage, that means we were scouting the girls, we didn't join. Ron's father got sick and tired of having all those cards around, and he dumped the box somewhere long gone, including the mint condition 1952 Mickey Mantle. On April the 19th of last year, 2018, that 1952 mint condition Topps Mickey Mantle baseball card was sold at the Heritage Auction House in New York City for $2,800,800. Yay, Ron. Would that you had the same acumen for spotting mint baseball cards as you did for spotting immaculate used cars. And for those of the Bond family, we all know what immaculate meant to him. But upward and onward. At ages 16 and 17, we got on a streetcar and went down to the local Social Security office and got our numbers straight. His first ended in 2480, mine with 2481. Then that summer, we went to work for a Chevy dealer who was a friend of my father's, and certainly no friend of Ron's father, since he was a Chevy dealer as well, and we spent the summer reconditioning used cars. College loomed in the fall, and I went off to the University of Maryland, where after the first year, I managed to get myself on academic probation after too much fun at the Sigma Chi house. And my roommate, David, managed to flunk out altogether. So it was the following fall, Ron was admitted to the university, and we decided then and there that we ought to be roommates. And that's when we got into real trouble after we brought the idea up with our parents. They were somewhat aghast at the idea, convinced that no good would come of it. So we all met together on one summer evening with the 4 of them droning on at the 2 of us with their doubts about our success in learning anything academic while we were both in the same room together, about how hard college would be, how we needed to study hard and not goof off, etc., etc. Now bear in mind that all of this wise counsel and admonition was dispensed by 4 people who had never stepped into a college classroom in their lives. But as life experience is an education unto itself, and they knew their children well, they were right. I lasted 1 more semester. Ronnie lasted 1 more after that. Too much fun, too much goofing around with new friends, which he made without any effort whatsoever, and too much of what became a singular discovery in Ron's life, beer. In those days, it was legal to drink beer at age 18, just across the state line from College Park into D.C. And Ronnie crossed that line quite a bit. If nothing else that he ever took from his first collegiate experience, it was his ever-increasing capacity to drink a lot of beer, a skill which became an art form during his years in Heidelberg, and which he practiced for the rest of his life. And at that point in his post-collegiate career, Ron became, in baseball lingo, a free agent. And he was quickly signed up by the Selective Service Board, which led to a whole new international chapter of intrigue and adventure in his life. Ron was in the Army now. And I think because of his native intelligence, he qualified for military intelligence service. So after basic training, I think it was at Fort Bragg, he went down to Fort Holabird. And as I understood it, he got his super crypto security clearance and became a spy for the American cause. In the very same year, 1962, that the other Bond became a spy for Her Majesty's Secret Service. That led him to the Military Intelligence Group in Heidelberg, where he and a whole host of comrades who have stayed together ever since, many of whom are here today, worked together in Army headquarters, lived together at 57 Hofstrasse, and drank together at Seppel's, even on Sundays, when Ron called it church. Now, while saving the world from tyranny, Ron took the time to welcome visitors to his adopted town, especially the female foreign exchange students from the States who would descend on Heidelberg by the busloads in the summertime. Out of one such bus came one such girl, also named Mickey, a student at Pepperdine College in Los Angeles. She and Ron met, and then I think they unmet. Then they met again, and I think they unmet again. And that dance went on eventually over half the world, perhaps, until Ron took his second or third trip across the country from here to LA with the intention of making his intentions known to Mickey's father, to Mickey's mother, and to Mickey. She said yes. Then finally, on one lovely June day in 1969, Ron and Mick, aka Ronald Moore Bond Jr., and Michelle Mary Bonzi were married at the Westwood United Methodist Church on Wilshire Boulevard in West Los Angeles. They came back here to live, had 3 children. Ronnie graduated from and then went to work for the University of Baltimore, rising to become an assistant vice president in charge of building buildings with Ned Turner the president, while Mickey went off to seminary to become an Episcopal priest. The children grew up and out, and had children of their own, as children are supposed to do. And eventually, Grumpy and Granny retired to their home in Hagerstown. Ronnie had his last Christmas there in 2017 and celebrated his 75th birthday on the 23rd of January last year. I could say that there was not a dearer friend than I ever had in my life. He was loving. He was kind. He was hilarious when he was in the zone, and he could yank my chain until the end of his days. He was also a straight shooter, and to the point when he needed to be. He did not suffer fools gladly, but would walk the second mile with you, give you his coat and his cloak also. He was the most humanely decent person I ever met. I'm not alone in my sentiments. In the closing months of his life, many of you wrote to him, sharing your thoughts and remembering better times. Melody wrote and said that her time with Ron was, quote, one of the top 5 experiences of my life. Steve wrote to say, your wicked sense of humor enlightened my life. Skip said, you have brightened the lives of everyone privileged to know you. My years in Heidelberg with you are among my most treasured memories. And Jay said this, your family and your friends are your lasting legacy. There's one other brief email I'd like to leave with you. It was from Ron himself, his last one. In part, it read, "In the immortal words of Monty Python, I'm not dead yet." Signed, Bond. He'd say that in his unacerbic kind of way. In the 14th chapter of St. John, Jesus says something of the same thing in his own incomparable way. "I'm coming to you. In a little while, the world will no longer see me, but you will see me. Because I live, you will live also. On that day, you will know I am in my Father, and you in me, and I in you." Jesus is speaking to his disciples here on the night of his arrest. They don't know that yet, but they know something's up and they're scared to death. They had yet to understand what Jesus was saying to them, that the heart of God will run out to meet every loyal soul, blundering along in life and falling down along their way, but always picking themselves up and looking towards the light. One day when I was at the house, visiting for what both of us knew was one of the last times we'd be together, Ronnie volunteered the words, "I'm not afraid to die. I've had a great life. I have a wonderful wife. I have wonderful children. I've had great friends. I have no regrets." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He was right, and I knew it. His name was Bond. Ron Bond. Rarely shaken, rarely stirred. And he was my friend.